Harmful intentions. History shows that technological advancement brought about the end of civilization, fragmented into divisions that hastened its collapse. The problem was that the majority thoughtlessly embraced regression, while the intelligent proclaimed that freedom had ended long ago. Freedom ended with an algorithm that read intent, marketed as a savior, but fundamentally incapable of understanding logic. To avoid chaos and preserve harmony, the apology law was introduced. If the algorithm identified someone with intentions deemed harmful, the accused was legally obligated to apologize to the victim. If the accused apologized and admitted guilt, acknowledging that they had harmful thoughts, they remained in the registry, but were not punished. However, if accused 3 times, or if they refused to apologize, they were declared a danger to society and exiled to the zone of silence, a place where no communication with society was possible. On June 23rd, at 1:10 a.m., 2 lifeless men in bland gray suits appeared at my door. "You are accused of harmful intent," they said, offering no further explanation. I had no choice but to go with them. The 2 gray men escorted me to a claustrophobic cell with concrete walls, no windows, and a single chair in the center. They told me they'd come for me at 6 in the morning to take me to trial. It was already 3 a.m. All I had was panic and the chair. In those few hours, I tried to recall all the harmful intents I might have harbored in my life. The problem was that I was one of those quiet, introverted types. A person everyone says wouldn't hurt a fly. Nothing came to mind. I recalled no one provoking harmful intent. I was used to being a doormat. Tired of fighting back, I spent my days writing. My wife had left with her colleague, and I preferred the solitude to her insults, calling me useless. Silence, at least, offered peace. Society, fractured by the constant surveillance of the algorithm, had left me without friends. That was the problem. I had lost the will to live in such a society, along with any desire or intention. Smoking, drinking coffee, and writing were habits, not intentions. Detention bewildered me. I didn't even live with intent. I suppose it was precisely 6 o'clock in the morning when the 2 gray men returned for me. They didn't strike me as the type to joke about seconds. They led me through narrow, gray painted corridors with gray doors on either side until we arrived at an empty courtroom where they gestured for me to sit. The courtroom reeked of bleach, as though executions had occurred. Suddenly, it dawned on me. What if the algorithm, incapable of interpreting context and logic in thoughts and feelings, had interpreted one of my stories as harmful intent? It was true that I often vented my frustrations by punishing characters in my stories. The algorithm must have misinterpreted every artist. That explains the disappearance of art. At that moment, a prosecutor burst into the courtroom as swiftly as a swallow's tail. But there was no defense attorney. That profession no longer existed. The prosecutor was a tall, skinny man, one of those people you'd say had been consumed by malice from the inside out. A worm, a tall worm with feet. He wiggled constantly, twisting as if he itched all over or urgently needed the restroom. As the worm ignored me, I let my gaze wander across the courtroom. The gray walls pulsed, rearranging with each blink. Above the judge's bench, AI slogans flickered erratically. Freedom is the absence of choice. Apologize to survive. Their chaos reflected my growing despair. It became clear that I no longer existed, even as an artist. AI wrote instead of me. The worm wiggled, pointing to the door. A figure entered, the judge of intent, and took his seat at the bench. His mismatched face and darting eyes gave him a grotesque, puppet-like appearance. When he spoke, his voice didn't match his mouth. His lips, twisted in perpetual disgust and drooping to his neck, bore no relation to the words emerging as if dubbed. For a while, the judge leafed through documents in complete silence. I assumed they were about me, though I couldn't imagine what they might contain. I didn't dare to speak or ask. When he finished, he looked at the worm, who leaped to his feet as if stung, and began speaking in such a formal tone that I struggled to follow. Your Honor, the accused was caught red-handed in the act of harboring harmful thoughts, and the prosecution will easily prove this. Only then did he take a breath. You are accused of thought crimes, the judge said. Which thoughts? I asked, my voice cracking. He paused, tilting his head like a machine processing input. Your thoughts. All of them. But Defensiveness confirms intent, he interrupted. My voice collapsed in my throat. I didn't know what they wanted me to confess. And perhaps neither did they. How do you plead? The judge asked, his voice rasping, as though he'd been smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day since birth. Plead, Your Honor. I mimicked how the worm addressed him. Plead to what? The accused refuses to admit guilt and apologize to the victim, thereby obstructing the legal remedy. Legal remedy? I thought. Am I sick? Sick with what? Does the prosecution have witnesses? The judge rasped again, directing his gaze at the worm. The worm grinned, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. We call the accused's teacher as the first witness. My teacher, I thought. Back when I went to school, there was no algorithm. If anyone acted harmfully, it was that tyrant of a teacher. The teacher, nicknamed Psycho, entered, older but unchanged. He had been infamous for flailing and throwing things in class, only to quickly smile as if nothing had happened. Hence the nickname. Now, Psycho was frail and nearly blind, bumping into the witness stand before taking his seat. When given the word, he began in a saccharine voice. "Your Honor, I did everything in my power to properly shape this boy. Perhaps I even contributed to his harmful nature, but my hands were tied. As a teacher, I wasn't allowed to discipline him more severely. And by nature, I am a gentle soul." While Psycho spoke sweetly, I pictured him hurling chairs. "He had harmful intent," Psycho said. "When boys beat him, I saw retaliation in his eyes." Retaliation? I feared. I also recall a literature class where the students were asked to write essays about their father's occupations. When I called on him, having no father, he hadn't completed the assignment. Naturally, I gave him a failing grade. His tear-filled eyes turned red as blood. I swear he wanted to burn the school down. Burn the school down? I just wanted to cry. As I've aged, some memories have faded, but I can swear to this. One day, when other children pointed and laughed at him because his mother still brought him to school and waited for him after class, he wet himself. I'm certain he imagined a gun at that moment. They weren't pointing at me, I thought. They were throwing rocks at me while I cowered in the corner, bloody and bruised. Your Honor, Psycho leaned forward, his eyes wide with sincerity. The accused often sat in my class and stared out the window. I saw the intent in his eyes, an intent to escape, to defy the order of the classroom. The judge nodded gravely, pronouncing, "Escapism leads to anarchy. He has been a menace to society from birth. There is no doubt that he is guilty." The judge allowed Psycho to leave the courtroom. As he shuffled out, painfully slow, or as fast as he could manage, I wondered, how is it possible that even after these absurd and grotesque accusations made up by a tyrant, I feel a harmful intent toward him? The judge turned to me again, rasping, "Do you admit guilt and apologize to the victim?" "Guilt for what?" I asked, confused. Am I actually on trial for one of the ridiculous situations described by a madman? "No," the judge replied coldly. "The prosecutor has brought witnesses to testify about your character, which is evidently prone to harmful intent. You are on trial for an intent only you can admit, and you must apologize to an anonymous victim. Otherwise, you will be exiled to the zone of silence." "Then, no. I truly don't know what intent you're referring to. Wouldn't it be simpler to tell me the accusation so I can respond to a real charge?" "You clearly don't understand the system. Prosecutor, call your next witness." The worm wiggled with delight, announcing, "I call the accused's wife to the stand." She entered, adorned with gaudy jewelry, her hair styled into an overdone perm that made her head look enormous. Her makeup-caked blouse emphasized her unattractiveness. A harpy, I thought. We had vowed to stand by each other in good times and bad. Yet here she was, standing as one of the pillars of doom, ready to crush me. I sat there, devastated, staring at the table, holding my head. I didn't have the strength to look at her, perhaps the most important person in my life, betraying me to prove her loyalty to the system for her own survival, unconsciously blending the dialects from my southern birthplace and her western home. She made a strong effort to speak in the central dialect. It was quite funny, but my reaction barely reached the corners of my lips. The main heroine of a Turkish soap opera couldn't have been more unconvincing and exaggerated. Your Honor, she said tearfully, though no tears appeared. This man stole my youth. The algorithm should have caught him sooner. She clutched a tissue she didn't use. He once asked if I was happy. Such doubt is harmful to harmony. I had once loved her confidence until I saw her superficiality for what it was. She added a sniff. I love this man, but I love the truth more. I'll tell you everything. The truth that the perm wasn't the best idea, I thought bitterly. I married him out of love, but he hid his harmful intent until the wedding. Soon after, he began calling me degrading names like useless and a rag. I looked up in shock. Why is she blaming me for her words? I feared his intent to harm me or end any chance of having a child. She threw herself across the bench dramatically, sobbing loudly, but still without a single tear. This deeply hurt me. After years of silence, I reacted with a yell. What are you saying? How dare you? I begged you for a child all these years, but you said you didn't want some brat to ruin your beauty. The judge interrupted me with a loud thump of his gavel, stating that he wouldn't allow me to insult the poor woman on the stand. I sat down, stunned, clutching my head. Am I crazy? Maybe they're all telling the truth, but my perception is warped. But if this is true, then I'm not me. I don't know who I am anymore. As my thoughts struggled to regain some clarity, the actress on the stand continued her performance. Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to add the most harmful intent of the accused. The accused? I thought. So now she's stripping away my very name, my status, my identity. I know I'm not perfect, but that's only because I respect the algorithm. The accused loved silence, and I preferred to speak my intentions out loud rather than live in fear of how they might be interpreted. Sometimes I wonder if I lost him in all that noise, or if I simply didn't understand him. She paused dramatically. But the algorithm is far more important to me, even more than my appearance. Maybe that's why he told me he wanted to leave me for his colleague. But I refused. And since the law doesn't allow divorce, Unless both parties agree? She paused for a long moment. He intended to kill me. She collapsed, fake sobbing and writhing in exaggerated anguish. A weak range of actions for such an actress, while the worm escorted the exhausted woman out of the courtroom. I remained frozen. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the judge asking me for the third time if I admitted guilt and offered an apology to the victim. I responded from some other place. The words slowly came out of me, almost mechanically. If we were caricaturing the roles, this woman, my wife, would be the victim. Am I accused of killing her? I asked. Well, yes, I must have killed her. There's no other explanation. Is this the guilt I must admit and apologize to this victim of genocide? Don't make me repeat myself. The judge was now even angrier. I told you that the witnesses don't know the reason for your trial. Only you know your intent. Will you admit it? But what worse intent could I have than murder? For murder, you'd be punished without trial. But your disgusting, repulsive, vile intent could shake society to its core and completely destabilize harmony. I sat down, mouth agape. Prosecutor, introduce the final witness, after which I will deliver the verdict. Completely beside myself, lost in my identity, and thus lost from the courtroom. I didn't notice that my mother had burst through the door and jumped onto me over the desk. She clung to me, caressing me roughly, as if slapping me, and hanging from the desk, trying to reach me with kisses. You're mine! I won't let anyone have you! As the worm gently pulled her off me and led her to the witness stand, I remained motionless. I just turned my head toward the window and stayed catatonic. Meanwhile, she wailed, "Let me take him home. I won't have anyone to sniff my flesh to see if it's gone bad, to call to come for me every time I have a diarrhea attack." He didn't mean it. All the teachers loved him. His wife adores him. He's a model citizen. I never let him out of my hands. He's my baby, my lover. He's my trophy, proof of my perfection. If you condemn him, you condemn me too. Come to mother, son. Let me nurse you once again. I stared through the window, a lifeless person inside me, into the lifeless city. In the background of the so-called harmony, this society operates like a perfectly tuned machine. Silence on the streets, people moving in neat lines with minimal interaction, and a complete loss of the spontaneity of human connection. While they forcefully dragged some mad woman out of the courtroom, I noticed the passers-by didn't even raise their eyes, as if everyone had already been condemned to silence. Absently, I heard the judge asking me for the last time if I admitted guilt and offered an apology. Out of my body, as if hypnotized, I whispered, "What guilt? For what? Who?" I've always been more afraid of hurting someone else than myself. The worm now almost gleeful, turned to the judge, who looked at me with wide eyes. "So, you admit?" "What am I admitting?" I asked, my mind still reeling. "You admit your harmful intent?" I didn't understand. The judge nodded to the worm, who whispered to me, "You just admitted your harmful intent." What did I say? That I would rather hurt myself than hurt others? "Yes," the worm rejoiced, and then it hit me. The previous night, I had thought about how I never quite fit in, how I had no life or expectations, and that the best thing would have been to end my life long ago. So that's it? I'm being accused because suicide seemed like the only way out. The judge regained his official tone. "Accused, stand up. It is my duty to read the law to you again. The court offers leniency. If you admit guilt and apologize, the punishment will be light, but your name will remain in the register of those with bad intent. If you are accused 3 times, or refuse to admit guilt and apologize to the victim, you will be declared a danger to society and exiled to the zone of silence, a place where no communication with society is possible." What will it be? Declare yourself, apologize to the victim, or be declared a danger to society. I pose no harm to society, only to myself. So I must be the victim. Yes, I am the victim. All these years, I've been helpless, not knowing how to fight, how to live, how to be human. That's why I intended to take my life. I finally spoke. "Your Honor, I admit I had a harmful thought," I said, "but not guilt. I will not apologize because it's not my guilt, and it's not for me to apologize." The judge's tired eyes met mine. He raised the gavel, declaring, "Guilty." As I was led to the zone of silence, I passed a wall with faint writing on it, barely legible, written by a shaking hand. "Silence is not the end." I couldn't help feeling I wasn't alone. Silence embraced me. In it, I found myself. The zone was truly silent, but not deafening, peaceful. Finally, I could hear my heart, my breath, my thoughts. Here, in a world without judgment, I was no longer a son, nor a husband, nor part of society. I was simply me. This wasn't the end, but the beginning. Silence. Let me exist. Silence is freedom. Eyes wide open. The sun hung low in the sky, casting shadows over the cemetery. It was a beautiful day for a funeral. Mourners gathered at the top of the hill, circling the open coffin to say their last goodbyes as Donna Herman had passed, or so they thought. Her family, dressed in black, stood closest to the coffin. Blurry shapes hovered above her. Muted voices drifted through the thick fog of her mind, distant yet familiar. Donna Herman wanted to scream. She could see them, her children, her grandchildren, her so-called loved ones, standing around her, dressed in black, murmuring their final goodbyes. The sky loomed somewhere beyond them, pale and streaked with the fading sun. The coffin beneath her was lined with silk and covered in a thick scent of lilies. In the words of the pastor beside her, she was dead, but she wasn't. She was right there. She could hear them. She could see them. Panic surged through her, slamming against the walls of her motionless body. She tried to move, to twitch a finger, to part her lips, to scream, but nothing obeyed. She was trapped in her own body. Frank was the first to give the eulogy. He was Donna's first son, her golden child. As he spoke, his younger brother, Josh, stared silently at their mother's body. Even in death, the old woman refused to rest. He remembered the doctor's remark that no matter what they tried, his mother's eyes wouldn't shut. They had asked him if he wanted to sew them shut, but he couldn't bring himself to do it, and neither could his elder brother or younger sister. "Are you Joshua Herman?" Josh blinked, snapping out of his thoughts and turning to the source of the voice on his left. "Oh, just Josh, sir," he said, clearing his throat. Two men in black suits stood before him, wearing sunglasses and carrying an aura of authority. The one on the left spoke first. "Nice to meet you, Josh. I'm Detective Foreman, and this is my partner, Detective Davis," he said, extending a hand. Josh shook it. "Thanks for coming out here. I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing by calling the police," said Detective Davis. "We'll investigate this matter thoroughly." Josh offered them an awkward nod as he noticed his brother's speech was about to come to an end. "I'll speak with you after the funeral," he said, before walking up to the podium to give his own speech. The detective stuck around, speaking to everyone who seemed like a person of interest. "She was like a mother to me," cried Cheryl Herman, Frank Herman's wife. She clutched tightly to her tissues, crocodile tears sliding endlessly down her cheeks. Her husband comforted her by rubbing her shoulder, but he too was too distraught to be questioned properly. Josh's wife, Celia Herman, had a lot to say about the entire family. She grumbled about how much Josh had suffered due to his and his mother's disagreements over his marriage. "We haven't been over in a while," she muttered. "I only know that Frank and Millie were the ones in charge of her care after we left the house." "Can you tell us more about Frank and Millie?" Detective Davis asked. "Sure thing," Celia said. She turned to the boy sitting on her lap. "Won't you go to Daddy now? His speech is about to end." She ushered away what looked to be a 5-year-old boy, the spitting image of Josh Herman. Once he was gone, she reached into her purse, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. "What would you like to know?" she said, blowing out a cloud of smoke. Detective Foreman coughed. "Anything you could tell us that you think is relevant will do," he said, waving the smoke away from his face. Celia took a long drag before she spoke. "Frank is the golden child, you know. He can do no wrong in that old bag's eyes. Even though Josh has been the one keeping the business afloat, Frank has always gotten all of the credit. And Millie," she exhaled slowly, tapping the ashes off the side of her chair. "Well, Millie's got her own issues. Dating a scumbag like Cameron. What was your and your husband's relationship like with the deceased before she passed?" Detective Davis asked. Celia sighed and pressed the cigarette into the armrest beside her. "I haven't spoken to that woman or set foot in her house since she called me a gold-digging whore the day I gave birth to Gabe," she said bitterly. "Josh always tried to keep the peace, though. He spoke to her as often as a son should." Detective Davis nodded, jotting down notes. "Right. Thank you, Mrs. Herman. We'll contact you if we have any further questions." He exchanged a few quiet words with his partner, and the two detectives split off into the crowd. Detective Foreman found Cameron lingering near the back of the gathering, hands shoved into his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. Unlike the rest of the family, he didn't appear grief-stricken. If anything, he looked bored. "Cameron, right?" Foreman asked, pulling out his notebook. "Yeah." Cameron barely glanced at him. "How long have you been with Millie Herman? A couple of years?" "Nothing serious." Cameron shrugged. "Look, man, I don't know what you expect me to say. The old bag hated me, wouldn't even let me within 10 feet of the mansion." Foreman raised a brow. "Why didn't she like you?" "I'm a DJ," Cameron said flatly. "You think Donna Herman would have wanted her goody-two-shoes daughter with someone like me?" He flicked his gaze toward the casket, his lip curling slightly. "Not that it matters now." At the same time, Detective Davis approached two well-dressed men standing slightly apart from the family. Julio Hernandez, a longtime business associate of Donna's, and Ben Handover, her lawyer. "Mr. Hernandez, Mr. Handover," Davis greeted. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Julio adjusted his cufflinks. "Of course, Detective, though I don't know what else to say. Donna's death was unexpected." Ben let out a sigh. Truly unexpected. There was still so much to be done before he stopped himself. Davis caught the hesitation, his grip tightening on his notepad. "Before what?" Ben hesitated, lowering his voice. "Before she finalized the changes to her will." Davis's brow lifted. "What changes?" She mentioned wanting to reassess her assets and how they would be distributed, but she fell into a coma before anything was made official. Julio cut in smoothly. "Donna was very careful with her affairs. It's a shame she never got the chance to put her final wishes into writing." Davis absorbed the information. A sudden death right before a change to a will? That was a clear motive for murder. But who in the Herman family would have wanted Donna gone before she could make those changes? His gaze shifted to the nearby staff. "Anne, Donna's longtime maid, stood with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a handkerchief. Beside her, Carlos, the butler, remained stoic, his expression unreadable. Davis approached them. "Did either of you notice anything unusual in the days leading up to Mrs. Herman's passing?" Anne sniffled. She was in a coma, but she was showing signs of improvement. I never thought. She shook her head, unable to continue through the sobs. Carlos cleared his throat. "There were tensions, sir. Madame Herman's children didn't see eye to eye when it came to her care." His eyes flickered toward Frank, Cheryl, and Millie. Frank and Cheryl insisted she remain at home. Millie argued she'd be better off in a care facility. Davis frowned. Cheryl was involved in Donna's care? Carlos hesitated before nodding. More than involved. She handled everything with the doctor. He wasn't just hired for Donna. He's been treating Cheryl's family for years. Davis narrowed his eyes. That was a detail worth investigating. Donna fought harder to be able to move, but her body would not listen. She knew who had harmed her. She could tell them herself if she could just speak. Desperation clawed at her, and somehow she forced her eyes to shift, darting around in search of anyone who noticed. And someone did. Gabe, the little boy's breath hitched. He didn't understand death. Not fully. He didn't like funerals, didn't like the way Grandma looked in the coffin, and he certainly didn't understand why, if she was supposed to be asleep forever. She had just blinked at him. "Mommy!" His voice trembled. "Mommy!" Grandma's eyes are moving. Silence. Then a soft chuckle. "Oh, sweetheart," Celia cooed, smoothing down his hair. "That's just your imagination, honey. Grandma's asleep." "No, no, no!" Donna screamed inside her mind. "I'm here! I'm still here!" A new voice, warm and honeyed, drifted over the murmurs. Children and their wild imaginations, right? Donna's blood ran colder than the silk beneath her. Cheryl, the woman who had put her here. The woman who had killed her, and no one would ever know. One by one, her family members approached to place flowers on her coffin. Some averted their eyes. Others kept them tightly shut. No one dared to look at her face. And no matter how hard she tried to flicker her gaze, no one noticed. Then, the last one stepped forward. Cheryl, Donna's blood boiled beneath her frozen skin. Cheryl smiled sweetly, crocodile tears welling in her eyes as she spoke about family, about bonds that could never be broken. Then she leaned down, her lips brushing against Donna's ear. "I know you're still in there." She pulled back just enough to meet Donna's unblinking stare, a serene expression settling over her face. One hand caressed Donna's cheek, as if in mourning. "Don't you worry." Cheryl's words seeped down her ear like a searing poison. "I'll have Frank join you as soon as the inheritance comes through." In the name of the park, they say you never really know what someone is like. Not truly. Life has a funny way of showing you. Coincidences, they call them. Those little twists of fate that seem too good to be true. Like how, just as the park started filling up with the wrong kinds of people, they all began to disappear, one by one. Strange, isn't it? I've lived here for decades. In this little house, with its flower boxes and its white shutters, watching the seasons change, watching the people come and go at the park across the street. For so long, the park was perfect. Flowers bloomed each spring, and the trees provided shade for the frolicking that took place under them. The good people were always there, the ones who respected it. There was Mrs. Calloway, who had walked her poodle, Franz, at the same time every morning for 20 years. There was George, the retired school teacher, who read his newspaper on the same bench while sipping his thermos of coffee. The mothers with their strollers, the elderly couples arm in arm, the joggers who nodded politely as they passed. These were my people. But then the bad ones came. First, it was the teenagers, those little delinquents with their cigarettes and their loud music, loitering around the swings, leaving their garbage behind. They carved their nonsense into the benches, foul words that I won't repeat, marking their territory like stray dogs. I scolded them at first, wagging my finger, telling them they should be ashamed. They only laughed. They had no respect for anything. Not for me, not for the park, not for the memories of the good people who had been there before them. But they weren't laughing for long. Then came the couple. The awful couple who would play disc golf and argue the entire time. He was a burly man with a voice like a fehorn, and she was a waifish thing, shrill and unrelenting like a bird. They didn't just argue, they screamed, and I even think they smoked marijuana. I would try to enjoy my walks, but their voices would pierce through the trees, ruining everything. Clem, Ollie, and Marcus, my Yorkies, would cower in fear as they approached us. It was always about money, or about some other woman, or about how she was ungrateful. And he was a brute. She used much more colorful language. The sound of their discs clattering against metal, mixed with their venomous words, polluting the air. Their presence felt like a stain on what should have been a sanctuary, a place of peace. I could almost hear the park groaning under their weight. And then there were the worst ones of all. The dealers. I noticed them sneaking into the park, lurking by the back benches where the trees grew thickest. They wore hoodies, their eyes darting around as they exchanged small bags for crumpled bills. I knew exactly what was happening. I'd seen enough crime reports to recognize the signs, and to think they were doing this when there were children and teenagers in the vicinity. The neighborhood wasn't safe anymore. My park wasn't safe. I saw them whispering to people who passed by, shifting anxiously, always watching their backs. I knew their kind. I had seen the stories on the news. Violence always followed them, and the police did nothing, and yet people ignored it. They walked past, either too afraid or too indifferent to say anything. I called our local police station, and they only told me they would send an officer to check it out. I will tell you, this did not happen. As I watched from my window and saw no police officers in the area, I did report this as well. But I knew the truth. If you want something done right, you must do it yourself. I had to do something. You can never judge a book by its cover, they say. People look at me and they see an old woman, slightly hunched, dressed in my sensible sweaters and shoes, walking my 3 little dogs. They see my tidy house with the white shutters and the flower boxes, and they assume I am exactly what I appear to be. They don't see the woman who was married to a cruel man for 20 years, who learned how to endure, how to be patient, how to bide her time until the right moment came, who realized sometimes something must be lost to be gained, as was the case in preserving peace for my 3 sons. They don't see the woman who grew up on a farm, who learned early how to break a chicken's neck in one swift motion. They don't know how strong my hands really are. Desperate times call for desperate measures, don't they? The teenagers were first. It wasn't hard. One of them, a particularly mouthy one with a sneer that made my blood boil, was walking home alone one night. It was almost too easy. A single strike with the tire iron I kept in my shed, and he crumpled like a rag doll. He and his friends did not hang out at the park after that, so far as I could tell. It was strange how quickly the others took the hint. The arguing couple was next. I followed them, listening to their voices rise in fury. They were on the edge of the park, past the old fence, where no one went anymore. She was crying, and he was yelling, his voice shaking the leaves. I didn't even hesitate. A push was all it took, just one push, and his big, lumbering body toppled over the edge of the ravine. The silence was so sudden, it was almost beautiful. It was as if the park could finally exhale. She turned to me, eyes wide, lips trembling. I thought she would scream, but she didn't. She ran. And I let her, because I knew she wouldn't tell. Women like her know better than to cross women like me. And maybe she will use this second chance to make some better life choices. The dealers were harder. They moved in groups, cautious, always looking over their shoulders. But people like them, they get greedy. They trust the wrong people. One by one, they fell Each disappearance, a small victory. The police didn't even look into it too hard. Junkies, they called them. No big loss. I made sure they disappeared quietly. A little patience, a little careful planning. No one questioned it. You wouldn't suspect I could even be capable of these deeds. The park is quiet now. The good people have returned, along with the lilac blooms and the koi fish in the pond. Mrs. Calloway walks Franz without fear. George reads his paper in peace. The mothers push their strollers without looking over their shoulders. Their babies have grown and play freely on the park equipment without having to read rubbish. Soon, a new batch of these little lambs will be springing about. The joggers smile again. It's so nice that the park has cleaned up, they say. Feels safe again. Isn't it amazing that all those rough types just stopped coming here? I wonder what happened, Mrs. Calloway mentioned yesterday, as we paused to dispose of our dog droppings before exiting the park. I smile back, but then, just as we step onto the sidewalk, I notice something. A new teenager sitting on the swings, head down, hoodie pulled tight, just sitting, watching. I grip the leash in my hands, my knuckles whitening, because it is safe, and I intend to keep it that way. Veil of night. I've said too much, Caroline exclaimed. She snatched her rain-soaked black denim jacket from the chair and turned to go. Caroline, wait! Hank caught her hand. Her slender fingers felt chill and damp against his. You can't expect me to believe. No, she murmured. No one would. And that's the point. It was useless even coming here. I don't know why I did. Hank squeezed her limp fingers, giving them a shake. Please, let's start over, he said, motioning for her to sit again. This cult, it's a coven. The Sisterhood of Unhallowed Light. She fidgeted with a lock of damp, auburn hair stuck to her pale forehead. Right, the Sisterhood. So, a few women who get together and play at witchcraft? There are 12. They wanted me to join, and I thought I wanted that too. But Caroline caught her bottom lip between her teeth. The midnight hue of her black lipstick was a stark contrast to the pallor of her skin. She took a breath, and the words tumbled from her. I feel seen by them, like they really get me. They accept me. They celebrate me, just as I am. And what they offer, the sense of belonging, the knowledge, power. I thought, why shouldn't I? A flash of lightning lit the rain-spattered window with a crack of thunder following close behind. Caroline's eyes grew large with panic, and she twisted in her seat to look outside. There are things we shouldn't play with, she whimpered. I know that now. I've completed 2 of the 3 initiation rituals with the Sisterhood. And you're saying this torrential rain we've been having these past 3 days is part of that? That's awfully biblical, isn't it? This isn't hurricane season, Hank. He shrugged and twisted his mouth in a half-ways grin. With weather patterns these days, who can tell what season it is anymore? It was me. It was the sisterhood. It's part of the ritual, part of the summoning. Coincidence, that's all. She clutched his arm where the sleeve of his t-shirt ended, digging her cold, clammy fingers into his bicep, and pleaded. You wouldn't say that if you knew what I've done, what I've gone through to make this happen. Caroline, she let go of Hank's arm and fumbled with the top buttons of her black shirt. Yanking one half of it to her left side, she exposed part of her chest. A long vertical slash was bisected by a shorter one, forming an inverted cross over her heart. The two slashes stood out as angry purplish-red marks on her otherwise smooth, pale flesh, and were knitted together with black stitches. They made me promise my heart to Valthus, the formless entity of writhing darkness whom they worship. Hank stared for a moment, then sputtered. Valthus? Your heart? Come on, Caroline. What? Am I supposed to believe they've cut out your heart? Isn't it usually the soul these sort of fanatics are after? Caroline grasped Hank's fingers in her trembling hand and placed his palm over the wound on her chest. Her skin was unnaturally cool. He held his hand there for a moment, then brought his fingers up to her throat, feeling for a pulse. Another clap of thunder startled them both. Hank pulled his hand from Caroline's neck. He stared at her in disbelief, saying, "This is some kind of joke. A prank. It's not real. How could you be here telling me all this if they've taken out your heart?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "But I think I've made an awful mistake. You've got to help me. Promise you won't let them take me." "No, of course not. Where would they take you anyway? A hospital? It's an abandoned old church, Blackthorn Chapel. They want to take me there for the final ritual," Caroline said. "To complete the summoning of Valthus, they need to make an offering of the heart." "But aren't you supposed to be joining them? Becoming one of their coven? This sounds more like a sacrifice." "Yes, it does. They told me it was my initiation. But..." Caroline trailed off, turning to stare at the rain beating against the window. In a low whisper, she continued, "Now I'm not so sure. That's why I'm frightened." The blinding flash of light lit up the nearby window, and a deafening roar of thunder shook the house. A loud crash followed. Nearby, a car horn began sounding, repeating its alarm annoyingly. Hank leapt to his feet and crossed the room to look outside. Christ, that was close. The tree next door has split nearly in two. Some of its limbs have fallen over a few cars on the street. The lights inside the house flickered. Once, twice, and a third time before plunging them into darkness. "I'll get some candles," Hank said, cursing as he caught his toe on some piece of furniture. He fumbled his way to the kitchen. just need to find my phone so I can light the way. One more thunderclap boomed overhead. A sudden blast of wind swirled through the house. Footsteps pounded across the floor. Caroline shrieked, and there were sounds of a struggle from the other room. "No!" Caroline cried out. "I won't go! Hank, don't let them take me." Hank stumbled from the kitchen and could see down the hallway to the front door. It was swung wide open, and the wind and rain swept through in howling gusts. "Caroline?" Hank called out. He heard glass shattering all around him. The back of his head felt like an explosion had gone off, and the world tilted and shifted into slow motion. Hank sank to his knees. His vision was filled with a combination of swirling stars and inky blackness. The sounds of frantic struggle moved away from him as his hands slapped the carpeted floor. He struggled to breathe and clear his sight as he held himself from pitching forward onto his face. "Caroline!" he shouted. His head throbbed viciously, and he thought he might be sick. From outside, he heard car doors slamming, and a vehicle roared to life. He struggled to his feet and made it to the front door. Through the sheets of rain, he saw the burning glow of red tail lights receding down his street. Pursuit wasn't an easy option. The tree limbs, which had fallen over several cars, were blocking Hank's car as well. He slashed at them with a hatchet he had stowed in his camping gear. The rest of the fallen limbs tore at the side and undercarriage of Hank's car, but he managed to break free. He swore and cursed some more. The lousy cell service the storm had left him with made searching the internet difficult. After several minutes, he found directions to and a description of Blackthorn Chapel on a website promoting ghost walks in the city. Once a place of worship, the old chapel had fallen into disrepair, and the ground beneath was, so the locals claimed, cursed. It took nearly an hour to detour around storm debris and reroute past streets that had been rendered impassable before he arrived at his destination. If he'd paid the $50 for the Ghost Walk tour, Blackthorn Chapel would have rated 5 stars. It was surrounded by an overgrown and tangled hedge of blackthorn shrubs, buffeted by the wind and rain. The gnarled limbs seemed to claw at the twilit sky, as though grasping at something unseen. The crumbling stone walls were cracked and weathered. The roof was partially caved in, showing an outline of jagged edges that looked like the jaws of some wild beast snarling or snapping at the heavens. And the heavy wooden doors were worn and splintered and hanging slightly ajar on great rusted iron hinges. The jet-black gloom beyond the entrance seemed more of warning to sensible folk rather than an invitation to step inside. But if there was any chance, he might save Caroline. Inside was where Hank needed to be. He passed through an opening in the rough hedge, careful not to let the thorns sink their barbs into him. Walking in through the front entrance, he'd decided, would be courting failure. He might as well put his head through a noose. Instead, Hank crept around to the side of the run-down property, searching for another way into the chapel. Lightning lit the horizon several miles off. The brief flash revealed to him that he was creeping through a graveyard, which was part of the chapel grounds. Most of the headstones were crooked, sinking into the ground. Some had fallen or been knocked over. Many lay half-buried in tufted humps of wild grass. With a sense of dread, he picked his way carefully through the tangle of ancient stones and grass until he was out of the graveyard and could lean against the chapel wall. His heart was pounding as he panted silently, trying to catch his breath. Above the howling of the storm, a sound caught his ear. Soft at first, but regular, insistent, and coming from inside the chapel. Hank strained to make out what he was hearing. It was definitely chanting of some sort. Hank edged along the stone wall to the back of the crumbling old building. The ground sloped down, revealing the foundations of the chapel. He spotted a break in the wall and rushed to it. It was a narrow space, but large enough, he felt, to squeeze inside. Before he did so, Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand. He couldn't imagine actually using it to hack away at some unseen coven member. That would be slasher movie extreme. He twisted it in around in his hand so that the square end faced out, becoming his weapon. He sucked in a few deep breaths, questioning his sanity. Then he scraped and squeezed his way through the narrow space. Feeling his way around in the dark, Hank discovered a series of long wooden boxes. Great, he thought. Could this night get any spookier? He'd found his way into the crypt. It took him a few minutes to pick his way around, but he eventually found a set of stairs leading to the proper part of the chapel. This was one of the cloisters, or side chapels. The chanting was more distinct. He could make out the words, "Valthus, Valthus, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light from the maw, where silence dies. Open now your 1,000 eyes." He edged carefully toward a gap in the wall, which entered into the chapel's nave. There were broken pews scattered throughout the space, casting long shadows from the candles, which lit up the altar at the front. Shadow deep and shadow wide, stretch the fold, let worlds collide. What was whole? Let it decay, let the void now have its way. He saw Carolyn, bound and gagged. She was wide-eyed and frantic, struggling to break free of her bonds. Unseen horror, whispered breath, we call you forth. We offer death, one by one, we fade. We kneel, take our names, unmake us real. A quick count revealed only 8 figures in hooded robes surrounding Caroline. He thought she'd said they were 12 in number. But this would be better odds. Hank hefted the hatchet in his hand one more time, feeling as confident as a person could ever be faced with such a scene. He took one step forward, but that was as far as he got. He was rasped from behind, his arms, legs, and even his torso in the grip of unseen talon-like hands. With swift force, they pulled him backwards, throwing him off balance. A ragged cloth was pressed over his nose and mouth. He struggled and tried to scream. Then blackness engulfed him. When he came to, Hank found he was now stretched out over the altar. His hands and feet were bound. Looking up, he could see eerie shadows playing across the vaulted arch above. "I'm sorry, Hank," Caroline said. "I had to do it." He snapped his head around in the direction of her voice and saw she was standing to his left. She held a long, curved dagger in her hands. The other coven members, all 12 of them now, were surrounding him. We needed a heart to complete my initiation and call down Valthis. He thought he'd known fear earlier in his pursuit of Caroline's attackers. Now, a choking sensation that felt like ice was spreading through his chest. In his head, Hank shouted Caroline's name, but the gag in his mouth prevented him from getting that or any other words that followed out. The coven members began to chant once more, "Valthis, Valthis, veil of night, drown the stars, consume the light. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it." The words echoed in my mind as I stood there in the dark, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the storm outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered against the windows. It was a night that felt like it was made for horrors. But the real terror, my terror, was already inside. I stared down at his body, lying in a pool of crimson that seemed to stretch out, devouring everything it touched. His once bright eyes, filled with laughter and warmth, were now dull and empty. His chest was still, the rhythmic rise and fall I had come to know so well, now forever silenced. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We weren't supposed to be here. I never meant for any of it to happen. The night had started out differently. We were celebrating. Well, I thought we were. It had been a long week for both of us. John had been working late at the office, and I'd been buried in a dozen little tasks at home. We barely saw each other, only passing like two ships in the night. So, when he suggested dinner out, I'd jumped at the chance to spend some quality time together. We went to that little Italian restaurant we loved, the one tucked away in the corner of the city, with the flickering candles and soft music. Everything felt just right. The kind of evening that reminded me of why we had fallen in love in the first place, However, as the night wore on, something changed. Something was off. Something I couldn't explain. It started when John leaned in and rested his hand on mine across the table. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't figure out. Was it uncertainty? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been sleeping well at all. We had building tension between us for months. First, it was little things that were simple to overlook, but now they were impossible to ignore. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to smile back. John sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking down at his plate for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I never did. When John didn't want to talk about something, he wouldn't. But then, as we left the restaurant, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. I couldn't help but smile, hoping that maybe he was attempting to rekindle the spark we'd once had. He'd always been good at that, surprising me and keeping the romance alive in his own way. "What's this?" I asked, teasing him as I took the box from his hand. "Just a little something," he said, his voice sounding odd. I opened it, and inside was a ring. But it wasn't a shiny, sparkly diamond ring that you'd expect as a romantic gesture. This ring was old and looked like perhaps it had been passed down through generations. The ring was tarnished, and the stone had a crack in it. "It's beautiful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. There was something that didn't sit right in my gut. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded, but found it difficult to smile genuinely. I felt chills all over. "Where did you get this?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Something felt wrong. John didn't answer right away. His eyes had shifted, almost like he was hiding something. He looked away before attempting to look at me again. "It's been in the family for years. It's special. I thought you would like it." "Special," I echoed. My fingers traced the ring's surface, and it was cold, even colder than metal typically is. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just about the ring. It was deeper than that. Something had been building for a long time. John as acting odd, avoiding my eyes, trembling as he reached for the car keys. But we didn't say anything more on the drive home. It was quiet, other than the rain that had started. Everything was blurred by the water running down the windshield. The wipers were thankfully filling our silence. When we arrived home, we went through our routine of getting ready for bed. John took a long shower while I tried to relax in the living room. But my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about the ring, about the way it felt in my hands, and John's strange behavior. When John finally came out of the shower, he walked past me without saying a word, heading toward the bedroom. "John, wait," I said, my voice shaking. Is something going on? Something you're not telling me? He stood at the bedroom door and turned to me. He stared for a moment, with just a blank expression. Then he sighed and walked toward me. He sat down on the couch next to me. I've been thinking a lot, he began with a low voice. About us. About everything. My heart thudded loudly as I waited for him to continue. I think we're drifting, Sarah, he said, his words immediately taking my breath away. I just don't know if we can fix this anymore. We've been drifting for months. It felt like the world was tilting. I couldn't breathe. Drifting? I whispered. What do you mean? We're fine. We're busy. We're just busy. That's all. We can fix this and make it work. John shook his head. I'm not sure anymore. We've both been pretending. We're just not the same people we were when we got married, Sarah. I'm tired. Really tired. I don't think I can keep pretending. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could to do was sit there, trying to figure out what he meant. None of it made sense. I'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, and now it felt like it was slipping through my grasp. Before I could say anything, he stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard the rustle of sheets and the soft thud of him getting into bed. I didn't know what to do or say. I sat there for a long time, what felt like hours. The silence was killing me. Finally, I was unable to stand the distance between us any longer, so I went to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. John was lying on his side, with his back facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt the coldness coming from him. John, I whispered. He didn't respond. I can't lose you, I said, my voice cracking. Please don't give up. We can work through this. I'll do anything. Still, there was no answer. Something inside me snapped. I was frustrated and scared of losing him. I didn't know what came over me, but I crossed the bedroom, grabbed the ring from the nightstand, and chucked it across the room. The silence was broken by the ring hitting the wall. Do you really think this is going to fix everything? I shouted. This stupid ring? A symbol of what? The lies we've been telling each other? Finally, John turned to face me, his eyes wide. Was he angry? Scared? But before he could say anything, I saw it, something sharp and dangerous glinting in his hand. He had a knife. I didn't see the motion coming. 1 minute, I was standing there, shouting at him. And the next, I felt the cold metal press into my side. It wasn't deep, but it stopped me in my tracks, clutching my wound. John, I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. What are you? But he didn't answer. He didn't move. I was frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My breath came in shallow gasps. In a panic, I grabbed at the knife, trying to push it away. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then, in a blur of motion, I grabbed the nearest thing I could get, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It hit him in the face, and he staggered backward, the knife slipping from his hand. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He lunged toward me, and I fought back with everything I had. My mind was full of fear, confusion, and anger. I didn't know what I was doing anymore or how it happened. All I knew was I needed to protect myself. The next thing I knew, John was on the floor. His body was crumpled, his unblinking wide eyes staring up at me. His chest no longer rose and fell. I didn't mean to do it, just another dead girl. Underwater. Trigger warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black, lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article, published by a local newspaper, reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the Water Rescue Service and Fire Brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight. Yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, no, and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow, and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance, but I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party, feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about, if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie. Something with a Z, though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., at just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream, where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes. But no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl, the one who got scared at every creak in the dark, the one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent. But when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her before the trip had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party, and that they went to the boathouse, where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast. Or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries, where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in. Enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching, or maybe none of this happens, and I'll fade away like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater, runaway bride, hopping onto a random train in the middle of the night was not the best idea Elise ever had. Not her worst, but a close second to when she was 13 and slept in the library overnight, only to wake up surrounded by cleaning pixies, surrounded by luggage and the smell of old clothes. She shifts her legs to avoid having them fall asleep before the train reaches the next stop. In other carts, there are no doubt people dining and laughing with glasses of champagne in their hands. She wishes she could join them in their revelry, but leaving her hiding space in a torn, dirt-stained wedding dress won't bring her the right sort of attention. Elise only wanted to be sure that no one had altered it without her knowledge, like her mother-in-law-to-be threatened to do when she failed to convince her to wear her gaudy dress from her own wedding. She didn't expect to hear screaming from the adjacent room when she tested how it fit. Glass bottles filled with wine for the guests breaking against the adjoining walls, the cries only stopping at the sound of a sickening thud. Her groom's voice only relieved her for a moment before she heard it discuss where to dispose of the body. She acted on instinct, opening a window and running until she found the train ready to depart. Tears come unbidden after what feels like centuries, thinking of only escape and surviving. Her plans of marrying the man of her dreams are now as broken as her heart. Her eyes grow heavy after her sorrow drains her of tears that further stained her once beautiful white gown. Not even the pain in her blooded feet could keep her awake as adrenaline faded from her body, replaced with exhaustion. Time passes her by as she slept, leaving her ignorant to the moment when the train stops and she's no longer alone. Someone large and strong grabs her, pulling her forward to the point where she nearly falls. Despite her panicked cries, Elise is dragged across the floor, her body already sore from her escape, her limbs unable to move from the mixture of fear and defeat. This is it, my end. They'll take me back to the estate, if not the chapel. My murderous groom will say I'm just a frightened bride with cold feet. And then it will be my body buried somewhere unknown. No one will know I'm missing until I'm nothing but bones. They take her into a train cart filled with people in fancy clothes, tossing her into an empty booth, her head falling against the window, exposing the darkness she used to cover her escape. She doesn't recognize the area behind the glass. Nothing but trees with no sign of human influence. Despite the throbbing in her skull, Elise turns her head to the gawking crowd staring back at her in confusion and horror. Their meal interrupted by her unexpected entrance. Only a lone man in a trench coat and wide-brimmed hat has a neutral expression when looking at her. "Is this everyone?" the man asks a uniformed man, the one she assumes brought her here. "Yes, sir. All the passengers are accounted for, and our stowaway." "Any sign of the necklace?" "No, sir." The man in the trench coat sighs in frustration. Elise shrinks into herself as the eyes surrounding her seem to search through her soul. "Who is she?" one whispers. "I don't know. I don't recognize her." "Wait, isn't there a wedding this morning? The Von Gray and Carlyle families, right? It can't be Elise Carlyle. She wouldn't be caught dead in such a state. Besides, why would she be running from her own wedding? They've known each other for years. Elise opens her mouth to explain everything. Yet no words would come. Try as she might, the only sound she can make is a strangled cry. The man in the trench coat walks down the small path separating the row of booths, hands behind his back in thought. Everyone else remains where they are, their panicked whispers filling the small space with dread. "Detective, what are your plans?" someone asks. "I already have the train staff searching for the missing jewelry. The conductor is aware of this, and I've informed him to keep the train here until the necklace is found. If the thief wishes to reach Bridgeway, they will have to confess. Otherwise, we'll wait until the local police arrive to interrogate everyone." The chatter rises to frustrated protests. The person who dismissed her identity, a middle-aged woman with a large hat decorated with silk flowers, rose from her seat. "This is preposterous. I have somewhere to be, and being fashionably late isn't an option. If I'm not in the pews at the chapel with the other guests, when the bride walks down the aisle, the shame will ruin my reputation and standing in society." The detective ignores her outburst to write down something in his notepad. The older woman, realizing her declaration failed to sway the detective, reaches for her purse, opening it and searching until she pulls out a hand mirror. Its metal frame shaped into soft vines with glowing stones for flowers. Elise recognizes her seeing mirror as the work of a famous artisan in Bridgeway, the place where the chapel awaited her, and what she once thought would be the start of her new life. The older woman leaves her seat, not making any effort to hide what she's doing from the detective or the other passengers. If he suspects something, he doesn't show it as he eyes the passengers. The older woman finds a small corner with an empty booth, turning her back to the others as she presses the flowers and whispers a few words to connect with another seeing mirror. Elise can only see a flash of light from the mirror before the detective takes position across from her, blocking her view. "Care to answer some questions?" Elise tries once more to speak. And again, only a sound of pain escapes her lips. The detective's hardened expression shifts slightly as she pretends to write with an invisible pen on the table. "Here, you can use mine. Now, first question. How did you get on the train?" Elise writes down a few words. "Open door. Got on before the train left." "And why did you get on the train?" "Running away. Heard a murder. Groom and groomsmen. Don't know who was killed, but was scared." "Your future husband and his groomsmen killed someone? What else can you tell me?" "Screaming, fighting, glass shattering, silence. Then groom says they need to hide the body." The detective continues to ask her questions, Elise responding with what few words she could conjure from her mind without fear settling in. When the interrogation is over, Elise feels hollow, yet despondent. The detective thanks her for her cooperation, moving on to a passenger in a heavy wool coat. Yet, Before he could ask a single question, two things happen at the same time. A uniformed woman enters the train with a necklace of flawless diamonds in hand, and the older woman throws her mirror against the wall. The detective springs into action, reaching the staff member in seconds. The older woman turns her attention to Elise, her expression changing from rage to concern. She approaches Elise while the others are distracted with the reveal of the missing necklace. "You're Elise, aren't you?" Elise nods, hope rising in her chest. "Oh, I should have known." The older woman returns to her snobbish attitude in an instant. "Of course, when I connected to my cousin's mirror, she was certain nothing was the matter, or she would have told me. With this theft of your wedding gift, I worried I would be late, so naturally, I had to give the bride a proper blessing to alleviate the results of my tardiness. And when the mirror was given to the bride, you won't believe who I saw. Did the Von Gray family servants think so little of me that I wouldn't recognize one of them from the times I've spent with their mistress? The dress wasn't even embroidered." She pats Elise's head as if she were a child, while it swirls in confusion at the news. Poor thing, forced to play in a foolish man's game. No doubt he believed the veil would hide her identity until the priest declared them husband and wife. No matter, everything will be revealed soon enough. I told my cousin to inform your mother that your groom has a convoluted plan to wed another woman of a lowly station. Once we reach Bridgeway, all will be well. Elise is not certain the older woman's assumptions are correct, but the thought of salvation is enough to set her mind at ease. Once the train resumes its journey, the passengers return to a modicum of normalcy, talking about mundane things as they ate their now cold food. Elise's own appetite returned as she dined with the older woman, as she spoke of the scandal that will erupt once the truth is revealed. With time, the wheels break upon the rails as the station of Bridgeway comes into view. The familiar face of her mother, eyes stained with sorrow, light up once Elise races onto the platform into her warm embrace. Lessons from my shadow dreams. It was storming, the sky a slab of slate with swollen thunderclouds crowding its expanse, each nudging for room. A wicked, unrelenting wind whipped chestnut hair into my eyes and mouth. Pulling it out of my face, I looked at the desolation surrounding me. Empty air met me in every direction. I don't know where I am, I realize, as the panic starts to set in, and my breathing turns shallow and rapid. On my hands and knees, kneeling on what appears to be sand made from stardust, I take a calming breath and rise until I'm standing. What is this place? Where am I? The last thing I remember is going to bed, my lids shutting to the lavender of my walls as I slowly drifted off to sleep. Not knowing what else to do, I started walking, and that's when the voices began and the shadows formed. At first, it was small, It was subtle. A whisper here, a mutter there, voices that got louder as I trudged on. I struggled against the wind, hugging my arms to myself, each hand gripping an elbow until my knuckles turned white as chalk. As I walked, the black, star-lit sand at my feet began to rise with the wind, forming shadowy figures that strode alongside me, the overlapping voices tumbling from their open mouths. I watched in morbid fascination, my feet slowing as their dark forms became recognizable, their faces slowly morphing into a colorless version of the faces I know. On my right was my mother, a horrendous, nightmare version of my mother, her blue eyes dark as coal, and her face twisted with malice. "What are you doing? Really, Midge? Are you fucking stupid? What's wrong with you?" came from the cavern that was her mouth. My eyes went wide, fear and pain forming as tears that threatened to spill. "You're not good enough. Why would I want to touch you? You're not what I want," came from my left, and my head whipped to see an equally nightmarish version of my ex. At this point, my feet had slowed until I was almost at a complete stop. More and more, figures from both my past and present began to form and dance around me, each hurling their own unique version of verbal awfulness. With each invisible blow, I shrunk until I was crouched on the shifting sand, hands splayed over my face to cover sight and sound. I squeezed my eyes, silently begging for it to end, for the voices and noise and all the venom of the world to stop. "Midge, breakfast?" I gasped, jolting awake to my mom's voice calling from the kitchen. As reality settled in, a sick dread pooled in my gut at the vague nightmare I'd left behind. "It was a bad dream, Midge. Just a bad dream," I mumbled to myself as I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. I tramped downstairs, the thick soles of my boots making loud thuds on each carpet-covered step. I slid into a distressed wooden chair at our equally distressed dining table that doubled as our breakfast nook. As I shoved eggs in my mouth, scrambled just how my mom knows I like it, I thought about our history exam today with rising anxiety. I was not the best at memorizing details, like dates or times, and last night Amy had another drama round with her douche of a boyfriend. My mom sat across from me, early morning sunlight streaming in from the window sink, sipping coffee from the chipped Mom of the Year mug I got her for Christmas last year, before Dad left. Before it all fell apart, we sat together in silence. She analyzed me over her mug as I finished off my butter-soaked toast. "You okay, honey? You seem stressed," she asked with a slight tilt of her head. I nibbled my toast while staring at my plate, not wanting to admit how egregiously unprepared I was for the day's exam. or the nightmare I'd endured that clung to me like static. It felt like I was seeing reality underwater. My senses warbled and muffled, making everything as impactful as an echo. My mom cleared her throat, snapping me out of my reverie. "Midge?" she asked, her gaze holding concern as lines formed between her dark brows. "I'm okay, just not as ready for my exam today as I'd like to be," I answered simply. The truth was, I wasn't ready at all for anything. My mom pursed her lips and narrowed her eyes, a clear sign she knew I was lying. To be fair, technically, I really was worried about the exam today, but I also was still disturbed by my nightmare, which stuck to me like a dark, immovable shroud. And it being my parents' divorce anniversary didn't exactly help. As if sensing my thoughts, my mom's eyes darted to the calendar on our white linoleum fridge, absolutely covered with magnets and pamphlets or flyers. Instantly, her gaze softened when she recognized the date. "Hey, it's gonna be okay, baby. I know today will be hard, but you'll be okay. Plus, your father is still coming for a family dinner this Friday," she said with a quirk of her mouth, as if that should excite me, as if that fixed everything. I simply nodded as I tried to swallow my last bite of toast, which had turned to sandpaper in my throat. "Gotta go, Mom. Thanks for breakfast." Before she could answer, I quickly grabbed my backpack and was out the door. I sat in history, staring blankly at the open-ended questions in front of me. Mr. Sikowitz sat at his desk in the front of the class, hunched over papers he was likely grading for a different set of students, his red pen lightly roving and marking with steadfast eyes. I looked back down at the unanswered prompts in front of me and felt my heart start to quicken. Gods, I'm screwed. Dad would be so disappointed, I thought with increasing fear. My breathing became slightly uneven, and with the panic, my nightmare from the night before reached towards the front of my mind. This was the last thing I needed. But it seemed the more I tried to repress the images and the memory, the harder they fought back. Shadows began to gather at the edge of my vision. That same smoky, starlit sand from the dream clustering along my peripheral. I blinked hard 2 or 3 times while keeping my head down, trying to force this contorted melding out of existence through sheer denial. But to no avail. The darkness stayed. Slowly, and with threatening dread, the dregs of my nightmare creeped towards my desk until it surrounded me on every side. I briefly darted my eyes around the room, desperate to find some reaction, any recognition from my classmates of the nightmare unfolding. But I was left wanting. The line between dream and reality was paper thin, blurring further as the familiar wraith-like figures began to swirl upwards and form. then shattered entirely as my nightmare came to life. My mother was again on my right, with a mouth black as pitch and her blue eyes drained of color once more. "What makes you think you can do this, Midge? Answer me, Midge. What's wrong with you? Are you fucking stupid?" she hissed as her ghastly form drifted towards my ear, her teeth gnashing with each syllable. It wasn't exactly the same as the nightmare, but it was damn similar. Now my father, in his trademark suit and tie, took shape in front of me, causing me to flick my gaze upwards. Looking was a mistake. His usually coiffed hair laid limply on his head. His eyes were endless black holes, and he stood with his arms crossed, intimidating and unmovable despite his form. His slightly transparent clothes were rumpled and worn, which wasn't like him at all. And he looked at me with a face of disgust and hatred as I'd never known. At least, not from him. "Grow up, Midge. What's your problem? Why can't you just get this right?" he shouted, somehow slamming his not-so-solid hand on my desk, causing me to jump to my feet with a yelp, my chair making a loud crash as collateral. "Ms. Sloan, can I help you with something?" My head whipped over to Mr. Sikowitz, and just like that, as I met his dark brown eyes, the spell was broken. I looked around and realized that the echo of my nightmare had vanished, and all eyes were on me, as if deciding if they needed to grab the straitjacket now or later. I audibly swallowed. No, sorry, Mr. Sikowitz," I said, as I haphazardly righted my chair off the ground and sat while keeping my head and eyes firmly down, my dark hair creating a curtain on either side of my pallid face. The rest of the day passed in an anxiety-filled blur. At every turn and every corner, I looked for the shadows, waited for the starlit sand to reappear and inch along the edge of my vision, anticipating the god-awful convergence of my nightmare and reality. But it never did. I stared out the bus window on the way home, watching the rain spatter the glass in large, heavy drops. "Hi, honey," my mom hollered from the kitchen when she heard me walk through the door, her voice warm and rich over the cold I felt in my bones, like a homespun blanket. Our house was a pretty open floor plan, with the kitchen slightly sectioned off, but having two large archways on either end of its L-shaped design. I watched her through this opening for a moment, trying to reconcile the nightmare version of her I saw at school with the flesh and blood in front of me. She was currently unloading the dishwasher, and when her hello was met with silence, she turned to look at me, her arm pausing briefly as she made to put away a plate. Her face scrunched, and she immediately put the dish on the counter. "What's wrong, honey? Did something happen at school? I tried to speak. I tried to open my mouth to tell her about all of it. But nothing would come except tears that began to blur my vision. "Oh, honey," my mom said, as she strode over to me, crossing the distance in 3 or 4 strides due to her unfairly long legs. I let her hug me, soaked up the feeling of being wrapped in her arms, and for a solid couple of minutes, we stood in the entryway like that. I reveled in her warmth, the sensation of her solid arms around me, and memorized every detail that made her real. Keeping contact with a hand on my shoulder, she guided me to the couch where we sat, knees angled towards each other. "Honey, what is it?" she asked. I looked at her, and at first I could only stutter. As I struggled to form coherent words, I felt my anxiety and panic start to rise. The shadows were at the edge of my vision again, causing my breathing to turn rapid and shallow. "Honey?" my mom asked, leaning closer. I could barely hear her, barely see her over the pounding of my own heart. "Midge," my mom said, a bit louder now, giving my leg a slight shake as she placed her hand on my knee. The shadows and the darkness were beginning to take shape now. Starlit sand rolling across the ground as it crept ever closer. Tears pooled along my lids, causing my vision to blur. Suddenly, warm, soft hands enclosed my face, and my mom's face, my real mom's face, swam in front of me. "Midge," she seemed to say in almost a whisper. "Look at me, look at me," she said, increasing the pressure around my head. "You are not broken, okay? I don't know exactly what you're seeing, but it's not real, okay? I'm real. I'm here," she said, taking the limp hand from my lap and gently placing it over her heart. I felt the softness of her wool sweater under my fingertips, like touching a cloud made of silk. I focused on her eyes, blue, just like they were supposed to be. "Your mom's, right here, Midge, right here. Not that ghoulish thing of nightmares," I thought to myself, as the vile shadow, puppeting as her, pushed and crowded closer along my peripheral. "That's it, baby. I'm right here. Breathe, honey. Breathe with me. Focus on my voice, on my face. I'm right here," she said with a squeeze of my fingers, as she had removed her hands from my head and was now holding my own in her lap, her gaze unwavering. I took a steadying breath. "Just breathe, Midge. That's all you have to do. Just breathe." I counted to 10 as I inhaled, and did the same on the exhale as my mom, keeping hold of my hands, did the same. "That's it, honey. Breathe. Just breathe. 10 in and 10 out. You can do this." I nodded, and as I expanded my lungs in and out, feeling my pulse start to slow, blessedly, the shadows began to ebb, receding from the edge of my vision. The grotesque, half-formed versions of my loved ones melting and fading away, bit by bit. By about the 5th or 6th of these exercises, the nightmare was all but gone, the shadows having slunk back to whatever hellish mindscape they belonged to. Prika, there she is, my mom said with relief, seeing my eyes clear and the panic gone, a slight smile playing on her lips. I crumpled, burying my head into her chest with small sobs. "Oh, honey," she let out softly, stroking the top of my head as only a mom can. "Has this happened before?" she asked gently. I lied, shaking my head slightly as I kept it tucked into the crook of her arm. Gods, her sweater felt like the softest pillow. I soaked up the comfort. "Do you know why your father left?" I whipped my head up, pushing out of her arms, taken aback by the subject change. Realizing I wasn't going to answer her, she continued, but her face took on a faraway look, as if trying to see through the smog of time to the not-so-distant past. Our family, both the men and the women, have always struggled to master themselves. We have the curse of extreme feeling, of intangible emotions strong enough to drown countries. And for some of us, that leaks into our dreams. And then, sometimes, those dreams, usually the darkest of nightmares, leak into our reality. She shifted her focus back to me and asked with a tilt of her head, "Do you understand what I'm saying, Midge?" "No, not really," I mumbled, swallowing and tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. My mom leaned forward, using her thumbs to wipe away my residual tears, and took my hands in hers. "Honey, what were you feeling? What did you see?" she asked, her blue eyes piercing. I don't know," I said, avoiding her gaze. "I was sitting in class, trying to take my test, and, well, I wasn't sure of some answers. And then I was thinking about Dad, and I panicked. Then the nightmare started. But no one else could see it, just me." At this, I raised my head to look at her with wide eyes, searching for answers, or preparing for a straitjacket, whichever came first. My mom pursed her lips, seeming to debate how much she should or shouldn't say. I saw the moment she decided to bear all, clear as day. "Honey, you were experiencing a moment of extreme emotion, of anxiety and fear, maybe panic. And sometimes those things can make us forget who we are, or even where we are. For the few in our family who have a very special heart, our emotions can cause our worst fears or worst anxieties to come to life. It usually takes an extreme or traumatic event. And given today's date," she trailed off, her eyes going distant again. After a moment, with a shake of her head, She returned her attention to me. She made to speak, but I stopped her before she could get a word out. "What happened with Dad?" I asked. My mom silently opened and closed her mouth, clearly struggling with what to say or how to say it. "When it happened to me while I was with your father, he thought I had gone half mad. Mine was a nightmare too, a wretched one that had me crouched in the corner like a rabid animal. Once we learned of our family history and what some of us have to deal with, he decided he didn't want to stay with someone who couldn't trust her own emotions, her own feelings, whose reality and dreams tended to mix and meld until they were one and the same." My mom's voice got progressively softer as she spoke, until it was barely above a mere whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mom," I said, taking hold of her hands and squeezing her palms. "That's all right, sweetie," she responded with a grimace, tucking another strand of chocolate brown hair behind my ear. "You know why?" Her eyes twinkled mischievously. My brow scrunched as I tried to find anything good in what had so far transpired, or what I'd been told. "Because," my mom said, clearly seeing I was coming up empty, "it's not just the bad dreams our hearts can bring to life." She smiled, placing a hand upon my cheek, rubbing small circles against my skin with her thumb. "It's the good ones, too." Epitaphs to Elsa. September 8th, 1986. Elsa, it's just me now. Just me and the waves. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just want to believe you can still hear me. The boat is quiet without you. I keep thinking I'll hear your footsteps in the cabin. That soft little shuffle you made when you didn't want to wake me. But I know better. You're not here, and I did that. I miss you. God, I miss you. You never should have stayed with me, Elsa. You should have let me rot the moment you saw what I was becoming. But you never ran. Not when the hunger started. Not when my skin came apart. Not even when you saw what I would do. You should have run. You saw it. That thing inside me. It doesn't care what I want. It doesn't care how much I fight. I don't want to remember them, but I do. That old fisherman just happened to be in the wrong place. He looked me in the eye and knew something was wrong. I saw the way his face tightened before he turned to run. It didn't matter. It happened too fast, and he split apart like a red, stained driftwood after they reached him. I didn't want to hurt any of them, but you know what I am, and you know the worst of it. The only thing in this world that can kill me. Water. The sea, the rain, even a goddamn puddle. You said it was poetic, that all we needed to do was wash the sins away, and that would be it. I wish I could tell you I'm sorry and have that be enough, but I know that it isn't. My mind is slipping. I thought I heard you earlier, but when I turned, there was nothing but the water. I can feel it starting to itch beneath my skin again. I must attend to its needs until morning. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I woke up from a terrible dream and could not tell where I was, nor even when I was. For the longest time, I thought I was still in our cabin, with the warped floorboards and the leaky window that rattled in the wind. I thought I heard the waves outside, but they were too far away. I sat up and reached for something, but there was nothing. No warmth, no weight, just a hollow feeling. And then I remembered you. I used to think I could live in your shadow forever, that it was enough to stand between you and the world, to hide what you had become from those who would have tried to take you from me. But you never really belonged to me. You belonged to it. I fed you. I kept you safe and suffered with you. And still, in the end, you left me here. I think I was angry. I still might be. You say you miss me, that you never wanted this, that you never wanted them to die. I believe you. You don't have to look for me. I'm already here. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Afternoon. Elsa, this isn't real. You're not real. I don't know what kind of madness has settled into my head, but I know what I saw. There is no one on this boat. I searched every inch, Elsa. Every cabin, every hatch. There aren't even footprints, not a single sign that anyone but me has been here. And yet, your letter was waiting for me, in the same place I left mine, in your handwriting. Exactly your handwriting. Where are you? What do you mean you're already here? No. No, I won't do this. I won't chase ghosts. I won't let my brain rot on the deck of this damned boat, waiting for another letter to appear out of nowhere. Not when I can still feel the scars where it broke through my skin last night. Raw, burning, until I fed it with something I brought on board. I'll leave this here for you, if only to prove to myself that I'm not completely unraveling. Maybe a drink will help. Leon, September 2nd, 1986. Leon, I can't see the sunset the way I used to, but I know you can. You always liked that time of day best. As the light faded over the horizon, the world softening, I remember watching you, even after you changed. I wanted to believe that if I just held on to you long enough, you would come back to me. I thought love could keep you human. Do you remember what you are, who you have become? You remember the killing, but not the hunger. Do you recall what happened before I died? You used to say that the sea was patient, that it takes its time, wearing things down piece by piece until all that's left is what it chooses to keep. You think you're drifting, waiting to decide how this ends. But you're wrong. You will never truly die here. Not unless you sink. Elsa, September 9th, 1986. Sunset. Elsa, you dated your letter September 2nd. I don't know what kind of joke this is. If this is my mind breaking, or if this is actually you, or if there's no difference anymore. But I know that date. That's the day after you died, and I killed you. I need to say it. I need to write it. I need to stop hiding from it like a coward, because I remember now. I remember the way you looked at me when you realized what I had become. I remember you tried to save me, tried to save them. I remember the knife in your hand and the tears in your eyes when you begged me to just let it end. I remember that you weren't fast enough. I remember the way you screamed when I touched you, the way your body turned to ruin beneath my hands, the way you stopped fighting when you knew there was nothing left to fight for. I remember the moment you stopped being afraid of me. I remember everything, Elsa, and you were right. I am not human anymore. You said the sea is patient, but so is the thing inside me. It waits. It watches. It lets me write these letters like I still have control, like I still have a choice, like I could ever truly leave this boat. But I know better now. I know what I have to do. This time, I'll finish what you started. Leon, September 3rd, 1986. Leon, you stayed up waiting for me, didn't you? You always used to do that when we were kids. You'd sit up by the window, refusing to sleep until I came back inside. I used to think it was sweet. Now I think maybe you always knew, even before you became this, that you were meant to be alone. I see now that I should have left you alone too, but I stayed and cleaned up after you, wiped their blood from your body, covered for you every time that thing leaked out from beneath your skin. I thought I was protecting you, but I wasn't. I was keeping the monster alive. And that's why you killed me. You can stop pretending now. You remember everything. I tried to end it before it could spread. I would have done it if you'd let me. You should have let me. Instead, you turned on me. You let it break me apart, like all the others. You wept and rocked what was left of me, like I was still yours, like I hadn't just died in your arms. And in some twisted way, maybe I am still yours, but that doesn't matter now. You have one thing left to do. Come visit me where I am now. That is the right thing to do. Love, your sister, Elsa, September 10th, 1986. Elsa, yes, you know me best. I stayed up all night waiting for you. I watched the page, scotch in hand, eyes burning. I wouldn't sleep, not until I caught you in the act and saw how you did it. But I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes, your letter was there, and your last words shattered me. You were my sister, my only sister. You were always there, watching over me, covering for me. You loved me when no one else could, and God damn it, Elsa, I loved you too. We were alone, together, for so long. Maybe that's why it happened. Maybe that's how we fell into something we shouldn't have. Maybe that's why you still stayed after I changed. Why you still brought them to me. I never asked you to do it. But I never stopped you either. And now I see why. Because I was happy. I was happy when you fed me. I was happy when you lied for me, covered for me, hid me. I was happy when you were the only one in the world who saw me for what I was, and still stayed. And I thought that was enough, but you knew better. You knew that as long as I was out here, I wasn't just Leon. I was it. I was the thing that wears me, the thing that spreads itself through my hands, my mouth, my breath. You knew what had to be done, and I stopped you. And now I have to finish it. Elsa, after reading your last letter, I tried something. I let the water touch me. Just a few drops at first. Just enough to test what you told me. And I watched my own skin blacken. I watched it peel away, curl like burnt paper, dust scattering into nothing. And for the first time since that night, I felt something leave me, something I can never let return. I know what I have to do now. I should have done it a long time ago. I'll see you soon, Elsa. Leon, September 15th, 1986. Radio transmission, U.S. Coast Guard Channel, so 8:42 a.m. DST. Yeah, this is Patrol 6 out of Newport, responding to a distress call. We've located the vessel approximately 17 nautical miles offshore, drifting. No signs of life on board. Copy. Unintelligible reply. Copy. Yeah. We're boarding now. The name on the hull matches the missing vessel reported out of Washington last week. Belonged to one Leon Mathers. Yeah. The suspect in the Olympia killings. Still no sign of a body. Over. Hang on. Christ. Do you smell that? Muffled voices. Jesus. It's in the fog. Thick as hell. The air. God, it's like it's sticking to my skin. Unintelligible reply. Boats in rough shape. Some flooding in the lower cabin, but no visible damage. No sign of struggle. Looks like it's just been out here drifting. There's a letter on the table. Several, actually. We've got personal effects. ID matching Mathers. A sudden, sharp breath. Shit. No body. No trace of him. But we found part of someone. It's a leg. Left, severed mid-thigh. Not clean. No ID yet. Yeah, we'll check the water next. Shuffling, movement. The soft slosh of waves, lapping against the hull. Oh, hell, sir, you need to hear this part. Listen, there's something in the water, around the boat. Not oil, not debris. It's dark, black as ink. Looks like it's mixed with the waves, but it's thicker. Like it's trying to hold its shape. God, it's moving. No, I'm serious. It's bubbling. It's a pause, a quick breath. Alive. Chunks in it. Carbon, maybe. But some of them, another sharp breath. Some of them are floating against the current. a quiet, shaken voice in the background. "It's watching, sir." "Orders?" Unintelligible reply. "Collecting samples now. We'll tow the vessel back to port. End transmission. To the person who buys my house. Months ago, I uprooted my entire life and moved across the country with very little plan. My wife left me out of the blue. With no tether, I cashed out my 401k and threw caution to the wind. I drove until I saw snow before deciding to try out the small town life. After nailing down a full-time job and growing tired of life in the town's only hotel, I reached out to a realtor and asked her to show me the house that's been on the market the longest. A fixer-upper was just what I needed. The realtor didn't have much information on the home outside of the basics, but I was sold as soon as I saw it. 3 stories, isolated deep in the woods. What more could a man looking to start over with a project ask for? After closing, I was given a fill folder containing all the important information. With all the standard documents was a handwritten letter from the previous homeowner. The contents of the letter have me questioning if I made the right choice, but I've never been one to turn down a challenge. I have typed the contents of the letter below. To the person who buys my house, congratulations on the purchase of your new home. Or perhaps, should I say, you're welcome for your new home. I can only imagine what type of person you may be. A first-time home buyer? A newlywed couple just starting out? A growing family looking for more space? A retiree longing to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city? Or even just an investor looking for rental properties? The possibilities are endless, but no less exciting. Just as exciting as when my late husband and I first purchased the property so many years ago. The tree covering so far off the main road made such a serene setting. We just couldn't picture ourselves living anywhere else. However, all things must come to an end. Such is life. I'm not as young as I once was. My children worried for me out here all alone. Or so they say. My oldest daughter decided the property was too much for me to care for on my own anymore, and encouraged me to move to the old folks' home in the next town. As loath as I was to leave the home we spent such wonderful years in, I could no longer argue with her. The upkeep was getting to be a little much for these old bones. I agreed on one condition: that the home not be put up for sale until my death. So, if you are receiving this letter, I have shuffled off this mortal coil. That also means that the house has most likely sat vacant for some time. In that case, there are a few matters of housekeeping you should be aware of. As you may have noticed when you viewed the property, the house is quite the old gal. Her 3 stories stand tall and formidable in the dense forest surrounding it. Though the trees tower over her, she will not be cowed. The roof has held up better than we ever expected with so many trees around. It was replaced in 2018. Another urging of my oldest daughter. Though it had only a few cosmetic issues at the time, the trees closest to the home are sturdy and hardly ever dare to drop their branches directly on the roof. By the time you move in, it may be time for a fresh coat of paint, though I found the house does prefer to be a light blue with white trim. She likes to stand out amongst the darkness of the forest. I'll never forget the way the old gal gleamed at Christmas time, with string lights shining bright enough to light up the snow all around. Oh, I do hope you have the most wondrous Christmases there. Anyway, I've gotten off track. Yes, the house will require a new coat of paint, and I'm sure you will decorate the inside as you see fit. Before you start to move too much around, be aware that some of the items in the house have been strategically placed. For you to fully understand what a treasure you have just purchased, I feel it is pertinent for me to tell you a little story. My Reginald and I purchased the home fully furnished before any of our children were brought into this world. The first year we lived there was pure bliss. Young and in love, we dedicated almost all of our time to each other. My husband fondly referred to this time as our honeymoon phase. One of our favorite activities was exploring the vast property surrounding us. When the weather did not permit roaming, we explored the home itself, though from the outside it appears as any manor in the woods would. Inside is much to be discovered. During that first year, we enjoyed the convenience of it being fully furnished and move-in ready. But over time, I yearned to decorate, to make the space my own. Reginald, ever the obedient husband, humored me. We started by taking down every painting that hung on the walls, deciding which to keep, which to sell away, and which to simply move to a different area. That is when the first odd discovery was made. Behind a great many of the paintings, there were holes, right in the plaster walls. Some appeared to be methodically cut in perfect squares. Others, as though a fist was punched straight through it. We, of course, decided that those would eventually be covered back up. I piled the painting up in the drawing room and set about cleaning the walls. By the end of the day, I had yet to decide on what exactly to do with them. So I let them lie and went to bed. In the morning, however, they were all hung perfectly back in their spots, as if all my work had never happened. For days, I assumed Reginald had done it, and he assumed I had. We ultimately didn't speak of it until it was too late, when my Reginald started back to work as supervisor of the factory in town. I resumed my endeavor to make the home feel like it was mine. I hated the big rugs scattered all around the place. I've always preferred a nice hardwood floor, No need for carpets that hold all the dirt and hair that's dragged in. The furniture was easy enough to move out of my way, and the rugs all rolled up nicely. I was mighty proud of my hard work until I got a good look at the wood. Large, dark, discolored splotches marred what should have been beautiful hardwood hiding under those ghastly rugs, which I'm sure you've seen. Unfortunately, much like the paintings, the rugs remained. I'd go into more detail, but some of the full truths have been lost to time. But I will tell you, be careful what you look behind or under. Though the house allowed me to dust and paint and add decor as my heart desired, it did not allow me to leave any of its secret spots uncovered. Behind dressers, cabinets, doors, paintings, mirrors, and under couches, chairs, and beds, the house hides. After the first year, I gave up trying to rearrange and became content with adding a few of my own touches here and there. I think that once the house realized I'd stopped trying to change it so much, it settled down. For a while at least, we entered a time of peace again. But the monotony of loneliness began to get to me. Thankfully, we soon welcomed our oldest daughter. As soon as she arrived, the house awoke with laughter and joy. All hours of the night, she would giggle, and the house seemed to echo with it, those echoes long lingering even after she fell asleep. As we welcomed more children, it seemed that no matter how much we tied, the house remained scattered with toys. It was as if I'd turn my back and they'd all jump right off the shelf and resume their places on the floor. The never-ending chore of putting away made me weary to my bones. In a stroke of wisdom, my Reginald decided one summer to send the children to my mother's for a week. She lived on the coast, never one for the colder air where we chose to live. We didn't see her often, and the children did love her so. Off they went without a complaint, leaving my love and I alone for the first time in over a decade. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. That first night, it was as if we were newlyweds again. But I won't traumatize you with any of that. We felt so young again, only waking when the sun finally shone through our bedroom window, with no rush to feed the masses. When we finally emerged from our bed a little after noon, we walked into an unexpected scene. Every toy, book, pen, shoe, and piece of sports equipment that belonged to the children had been strewn about the first floor in the most uncivilized manner. There was no question that the house had been perfectly clean the night before. Our first thought was that we'd been burgled, that someone had broken in, thinking we'd all left for the coast. The only problem is, we told no one the children were leaving, and we had no neighbors to have noticed their departure. Regardless, we checked for signs of forced entry on all the doors and windows. Finding nothing, we were forced to believe it was whatever force we had once felt in our home, agitated with us once more. As you've probably ascertained, the house is very particular. We had come to accept not being able to move the furniture or pictures, but were only just realizing that the house did not like many of the new things we'd brought in either. How many times had I picked certain toys up off the floor, only to find them there again in the morning? How many times had I unfairly blamed the children for messes they claimed they knew nothing about? That morning, we saw the truth of the matter, and I knew something had to change. The children didn't deserve my anger or anxiety. They were not to blame. When they returned, I was sure to tell them as much. But before then, we had to find a way to coexist again with the forces in the house. What should have been a week of relaxation and reconnecting became a week of trial and error. On the first day, we tidied the house, putting everything back where we thought everything should go. Each room made perfect. Then we waited for the first item to fall out of place. As if the house was testing us, it took hours for anything to happen that first day. Then it started, slowly at first, giving us time to notice the items that were out of place, time to correct. It seemed to go in order of the things that bothered it the most, or maybe just the longest. The first toy to go was a set of bells we'd gotten when our oldest was small. The set was a popular toy amongst all our babies, with our youngest being nearly 8 at the time. These bells hadn't truly rung joyously through the house in years, yet they always made their way off the shelf onto the rug. Our family's peace was more important than any sentimentality, or at least that's what my husband and I agreed. And into the bin they went. Quickly, we noticed patterns. Toys that made too much noise. Shoes that left scuffs on the floor. Sports equipment that may or may not have been involved in a few broken windows and busted light bulbs. Books that sat too heavy on the overburdened bookshelves. Room by room we went, removing any and all items the house found to be offensive. It was by no means an easy undertaking. So many items had many more years of use left in them. But knowing what I knew, I could no longer sacrifice my sanity for a few boxes full of possessions. When the last box of offending items left the property, it was as if the house itself took a deep, calming breath. I hadn't quite realized just how stressed I'd been feeling until I didn't feel it anymore. Weight I'd grown accustomed to bearing eased off my shoulders. The air was lighter, the lights were brighter, and the house even seemed to smell better. Not that there was a noticeable bad smell before. Everything just felt better. That night, Reginald and I slept deeply for the first time in years, waking refreshed and ready for anything. I was ready for my children to come home. This week had been the longest we'd been apart since the youngest was born. I'd spent 2 weeks in the hospital that time, but that's neither here nor there. We had 2 more days before my mother would return them to us, sun-kissed and spoiled rotten in the best way. In those 2 days, I made time to sit quietly and listen to the house the way I used to when it was just Reginald and myself. Familiar creaks and groans greeted my ears. My senses were filled with the house. The smell of wood, water, earth, detergents, fabric, food, all seemed to swirl around me. For a long while, it was all just the normal feelings of home, of any home. Every house I'd ever lived in had the same smells and sounds. I assume every house in the whole world has the same base set of smells, sounds, and lights. I knew there was something past that, though, here. So I waited. A few months back, I'd read a book on meditation, hoping to help lift some of the stress I'd been buried under. While I waited, I took a few quests from my readings. I methodically relaxed each muscle, starting at my toes and working my way to my head. I felt each breath as it traveled in and out of my lungs. I tried to tune my ears inward to listen to the beating of my heart, attempting to hear the blood rushing through my veins. That's when I finally heard the breathing. It wasn't my own. It was offbeat of mine. Reginald wasn't home. We had no pets, but the slow, deep, steady breaths were just a whisper in my ear. I focused with all my might on the sound, hoping to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Realization dawned on me. I was all around me, as if I was inside a lung. Then, a heartbeat, slower than my own, reverberated around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. What I saw changed everything. Ever so lightly, the walls billowed in and out. Ever so slightly, the chandelier above my head rhythmically bobbed, as if contracting, thrumming. Everything in the central family room moved in a steady beat. How many days had we spent in this room? The majority of our lives circulated in this room, where we were most often all together as a family, the way a family room should be used. We often joked that this room was the heart of the house, because there was always so much love here. We were not wrong. This room truly holds the heart of the home. You may think I'm crazy, but I am telling you, here and now, the house is alive. It is not haunted. There are no goblins or ghouls. The house itself is a living, breathing being, a being that I have cared for, just as it has cared for me, for more years than I care to count. You see, my daughter never believed. She did not understand. When I finally agreed that I was too old to care for the house on my own, it was because the house told me so. Not her. I was growing too old to care for it, and in turn, it could no longer care for me. It needs someone younger, someone to breathe new life into it again. And if you care for it, it will care for you. When tended to properly, it will multiply your life and give you more than you can ever imagine. I do hope Carmen found the right person to take on the challenge. I pray the house does not miss us too terribly much. If you follow the rules, then it should grow to love you, too, I'm sure. With love, Cynthia. Rule 1. Don't move the furniture. Rule 2. Don't leave any holes uncovered. Rule 3. Don't make changes. Only fix things that break. Rule 4. Don't put anything on the mantel in the bedroom. Rule 5. Never throw balls inside. Rule 6. Never scream at your partner inside. On the grounds is fine. Rule 7. Always walk gently. Rule 8. Always lock the doors. Rule 9. Always listen to the house. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. I have lived in the house for a week now. What I thought to be the ramblings of a crazy old woman who wanted nothing more than to stay with her home have quickly become undeniable truths. On my second night, the house welcomed me in a way only it could have. I'm not sure if this makes me just as crazy as her, but I've vowed to care for this home as long as it cares for me. We're off to a great start. Rakotsbrücke, the Devil's Bridge. Rakotsbrücke, the Devil's Bridge. Whispers of mystery had long shrouded Rakotsbrücke, the legendary Devil's Bridge in Kromlau, Germany. Stories had swirled about its eerie perfection for generations, how its reflection in the still waters formed a flawless circle. Some believed it was merely an optical illusion. Others claimed it was something more, a portal to the unknown. Hans and Gerda Schmidt had grown up in the shadow of these legends. Their childhoods were filled with hushed tales passed down through the years, some dating back over a century. But the most chilling story was always the same. At certain times of the year, the bridge's reflection wasn't just a trick of the light. It was a gateway, and those who crossed it at the wrong moment were never seen again. Most dismissed such stories as mere folklore, but Hans and Gerda couldn't ignore the unsettling number of disappearances. Determined to separate fact from fiction, they spent months scouring old newspaper archives, compiling every recorded vanishing link to Rakotsbrücke. With each faded article, each cryptic account, a pattern emerged. If their calculations were correct, the next opening of the gateway was near. And this time, they would be there to witness it. Their research had uncovered a chilling pattern. The phenomenon occurred only once in winter, but was far more frequent during unseasonably warm periods in the warmer months. This week, temperatures were set to spike well above normal, and Hans and Gerda were convinced that the anomaly was bound to happen again. Armed with sophisticated audio and video equipment, Hans, Gerda, and several close friends set up camp near the bridge early Monday morning. Their goal was simple: capture undeniable proof of the anomaly. They weren't the first to try, of course, but they were determined to be the first to succeed. Each member of the group would take turns operating the equipment, ensuring the bridge was never left unwatched. Gerda was first. Luck would have to be on her side. She steadied the camera, framing the sublimely unsettling structure as it loomed over the river, its reflection dissolving into the rising morning mist. Days passed as the majestic bridge stood in solemn silence. Time was running out. By Thursday, tension had given way to celebration. The group partied, drank, and danced near the eerie silhouette of Rakotsbrücke, their initial excitement fading into the rhythm of the night. Laughter echoed through the trees, until a sudden burst of blinding white light shattered the darkness. A collective gasp cut through the air. Hans, Gerda, and the others sprinted toward the equipment, hearts pounding. Julio, the group's cameraman for that night, stood motionless, his camera locked onto the event. Then he sighed and shook his head. False alarm. They followed his gaze to the source. A biker gang rolling through the woods, their headlights gleaming off the water, engines rumbling like distant thunder. It was an illusion. The spacing of their bikes on the bridge and the reflection of their lights momentarily brought the bridge alive. From a distance, the bridge looked like a space portal had formed. Are you recording this? Gerda asked Julio. Never stopped. At least we can add it to the footage of our trip when we edit the video. The air deflated from their lungs. Shoulders slumped. Heads hung low. Disappointment settled over the camp like a heavy fog. By Sunday, hope had dried up completely. They packed some of their things, one by one, muttering the same defeated refrain: "We'll try again next year." Ever the optimist, Gerda climbed onto a picnic table, raising her beer in defiance. I want to thank all of you for coming to witness what never was, she announced, her voice carrying over the quiet camp. But tonight, we're forgetting about that damn gateway. Tonight, we party like it never existed. A roar of approval followed, and soon, the music and laughter returned. None of them noticed the waters beneath Rakotsbrücke begin to shimmer. None of them saw the perfect gaseous cloud take shape inside the circle once more. Even Julio, who found himself once again on camera duty, did not notice the bridge coming alive. It was midnight, and the others were still lost in their revelry at the campsite. None of them was there to witness what was unfolding. He might have caught it sooner, if not for Fräulein Gretchen. She had been eyeing him since they passed his group, while hiking on Monday. Now, as the others partied, she had cozied beside him, drawn to the quiet observer behind the camera. Since he did not drink, he had no problem operating the equipment, though tonight his attention was divided. That night, Julio had his blanket on the ground. Fraulein Gretchen and he were making out when he caught a glimmer of light out of the corner of his eye. Standing up immediately, he checked to see if the camera and audio were working. Gretchen was still playfully fondling his ear with her lips. "Stop. This is important. Can't you see what's happening?" he said to her with a stern but playful voice. "Look at it. It's getting brighter and brighter. Come on, let's get closer." The luminous gateway had a compelling allure, almost trance-like, and it kept tugging at their interest. At the river's edge, there was a small rowboat. They went down to the water, determined to get a closer look. Meanwhile, the light got bright enough to grab the attention of the others partying at the campsite. Hans was the first to notice the light. "Look, guys, the forest is beginning to light up. Must be responding to our partying," he said playfully. "No, I think it's the bridge," Gerda said as she took off, running toward Julio's location. The rest of the gang took off after her. There was no sign of Julio near the video equipment, and the forest glow was getting brighter and brighter. Gerda turned toward the bridge, her thoughts conflicting. She wanted her full attention to find Julio and not care about the bridge, yet the bridge was mesmerizing. Her heart was racing as the ominous light loomed large. "Julio! Julio!" the rest of the group yelled. The yells from her friends temporarily knocked her back to reality. She saw a small rowboat drift through the fog on the far side of the river. Her stomach clenched. That same boat was near them when they first set up the equipment on Monday, and it hadn't moved until now. "Guys, get over here!" Gerda's voice cut through the tense air. She was standing near the equipment. As they gathered around, she maneuvered the camera so everyone could see it. The camera began playback with the motorcycles, and they watched as the humming of the bikes slowly transformed the water. "Look at the water, guys. It appears to be vibrating. Would the sound waves have that big of an effect on the water?" Hans asked. "It must have," she replied as she zoomed in on the water. "When I go back and view the water, it is always completely calm. Something had to stir it." Gerda forwarded the camera to the moment the bridge came alive, and what they saw blew their minds. As they began watching, they heard a female voice. Stunned, Gerda rewound the tape, and sure enough, there was a flirtatious voice in the background. "Maybe Julio is at the nearest hotel?" A voice in the background whispered, drawing quiet snickers from the group. "Quiet!" Gerda snapped as they continued watching the video. Then they saw it. The gateway. "Look at the bridge! My God, it's real!" There's Julio and the girl," Hans pointed. They watched as the two made their way down the steep slope. Julio jumped in the boat first and turned to help Gretchen aboard. Freeing themselves from the riverbed, he slowly rowed toward the ominous, bright light, as if he were in a trance. Gretchen sat in front of him, leaning back on his chest, mesmerized by the gaseous light. They were approximately 30 yards from the gateway, and the recording stopped. What happened? Hans asked. I don't know, Gerda replied. No, this can't be happening, she shouted. She rewound the tape for a few seconds and played it back, but the same ending showed each time they watched. Scheisse, Gerda exclaimed. What do we do now? We have 2 people missing, and the tape shows us something, only up to the point where we think they have disappeared. What are we going to tell people? We tell the truth, Gerda. This is why we came here, to find the truth. Hans added, but we don't have the truth. Only partial truths that add to the folklore. This tape will open up more questions than answers, and we will at the tail end of it, searching for more clues. Lynn, Gerda's best friend from London, walked over to her, put her hands on her shoulder, and turned her around so she could cry. Once Gerda's head hit her shoulder, she began to sob uncontrollably. Lynn knew the effect the events had on her. All the time and energy she put into this led to nothing but more questions. She also knew that deep down inside, Gerda wanted to see the gateway in action, even if it was at the cost of her friend's life, which made her feel even worse. Lynn lifted her head. Hey, don't worry. You do have something far more than you ever had. We all know what happened here. Most of it is on tape. I say we immediately make a copy of this tape, take it to the police, and let them investigate their copy. And we have concrete evidence to examine on our own. Next time we are here, we will be much better off than before. Lynn's right, Gerda. We now know a lot more than we ever did. We know the vibrations from the bikes started the gateway. We know that we can't stare at it because of its trance-like powers. And we know the best time to be here and get another shot. Hans added. Yes, that's right, Gerda. The others chimed in. 1 year to the day, the crew set up again. In honor of Julio, they set up a makeshift burial plot at the exact location where the camera stood last year. Gerda felt this new location was better. It was on the other side of the lake and had a better view. This time, the crew was on high alert. There was no partying this time. Their campground was just up the hill from the camera, and they could see partial spots of the lake and bridge from their tents. As they were finishing up with their tents, Lynn ran over to Gerda. Look at those 2 over there, Gerda. She pointed. No, that can't be. They took off running over the bridge, yelling, Julio, Julio. A young man turned around as they approached, staring at them, confused. "Yes, how do you know my name?" So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.